The entire room laughed at her cheap bracelet, but 10 minutes later, they were on their knees, begging to keep their seats. Have you ever witnessed a high society party turn into a courtroom that strips away all pretenses? That girl, the one mocked as a trash picker told she didn't belong, was the rightful heir all along, and the bracelet she brought wasn't just a gift. It was the spark that blew up every lie, every borrowed reputation, and every ounce of power built on looking down on others. Watch until the very end, because the final twist will send chills down your spine. Some wounds don't bleed. They're inflicted by Dior gowns, champagne whispers, and the gaze of someone who once called you daughter. At the highest hilltop of Malibu, where the golden sunset glazed the terracotta rooftops of old Tuscan-style mansions, Kingsley Estate stood like an unshakable monument to the family that once shaped the entire financial industry of the United States. On that day, the 85th birthday celebration of Arthur Kingsley, the patriarch of the dynasty, was held in the grand hall of the mansion. Every detail had been orchestrated to perfection, from the echo of a Vivaldi string quartet to the way the Swarovski chandelier shimmered across the imported Italian ebony floors amid a sea of America's wealthiest tycoons, senators, bank magnates, and media moguls. A young woman entered. No escort, no flashes. She was Sienna Grace. And this was her family. She wore an ivory linen dress, hand-embroidered by an unknown artisan from the Midwest. Her hair was tied with an old ribbon. In her hands, she held a plum velvet box. No silk bow, no gold logo, just a gift. A woman draped in Chanel haute couture took a sip of wine and tilted her head toward her husband. "Who's that?" the new bartender. A group of heiresses giggled just loud enough for Sienna to hear bold move, wearing a second-hand dress to the Kingsley ballroom. Ordinary people call that a fashion faux pas. Here we call it a visual crime. But Sienna kept walking. Every step she took gently brushed against their artificial pride, making them recoil not out of fear, but disdain. And then Ava Whitmore arrived. The chandelier's light bathed her sapphire Dior gown, amplifying her innate arrogance. Ava didn't walk in alone. Beside her was Chase, Morgan Sienna's ex-boyfriend. Now Ava's latest conquest. Ava lifted her glass eyes, locked on Sienna, her voice honey-sweet, but colder than ice. "Sienna, you brought a gift. How adorable it looks, just like something I gave my driver last week." The hall froze for a moment, then erupted in laughter. Not the laughter of joy, but of unified cruelty. Sienna tightened her grip on the box. She said nothing. She didn't bow her head. Her eyes didn't sparkle like gemstones. They were still like a deep well, but no one saw that. All they saw was a girl who looked out of place, unsophisticated, and by their standards, unworthy of being there. And as she stepped forward toward her grandfather with the humble gift in hand, she had no idea a storm was about to break loose. Not from her, but from the truth they were all about to face. Sienna stood in the middle of the room, where every glance was a silent blade. Everyone there wore the mask of the elite, body-hugging Valentino gowns sculpted like art-tailored Tom Ford tuxedos, gleaming Italian leather shoes, and smiles sharp enough to shred your self-worth without raising their voice. A platinum-haired lady, seated beside a pot of white orchids, leaned toward her companion, speaking loudly enough for 3 tables to hear. "Why is the helper wearing a dress and walking around like she belongs?" A young woman raised her champagne flute, arching a brow. "Seriously, did no one check the guest list?" Laughter followed, sharp, brittle like shattering crystal, turning the air ice cold. Yet Sienna walked on. Each step on the ebony floor echoed like a quiet declaration. I am here. I am not retreating. She approached the main table where her grandfather sat. For a fleeting second, his gaze softened, then turned unreadable. A man in a white suit whispered, "She came alone. No plus one, or maybe no one wanted to come with her." A woman stifled a laugh behind her hand and added, "Maybe no one even knows who she is." From every corner of the room, the whispers spun a web of judgment around Sienna. Each step she took thickened the air with exclusion, mockery, and dismissal. A floor manager stepped up, trying to sound polite, but his tone betrayed unease. "Ma'am, can I help you with something?" The question, though wrapped in courtesy, carried the weight of a veiled invitation to leave. Sienna gently shook her head. Her face was calm, her eyes deep bottomless, unflinching. She knew in this room no one wanted her there. No welcoming gaze, no genuine smile. She didn't belong at the party. She didn't belong at the table. She didn't belong in the memories they shared with one another. Yet she remained quiet, but proud, like a defiant presence, challenging the sea of pretense flooding that glittering room. Ava stepped forward, the chandelier's light glinting off the $90,000 emerald necklace nestled in its custom velvet box. She held her head high, as if about to walk into a coronation. Her smile curved just enough to conceal her ambition. "Grandfather, this gift represents the love and respect I've always had for you," she sang, and the entire room erupted in applause. Glasses clinked, soft gasps escaped from the elite crowd with habitual admiration. Cameras flashed. Ava shone, radiant, magnificent, but her eyes flicked toward Sienna. Just for a moment, a glint of icy triumph slicing through. Then slowly, the room turned its attention to Sienna. No applause, no words of encouragement. A man seated on the right side of the hall muttered dagger-like, "What's she trying to do?" "Copy. Ava." A woman with a string of pearls sneered. "I'm guessing she brought a necklace too. Probably from a flea market somewhere." Sienna didn't flinch. She stepped forward. Each step felt like wading through waves of ridicule. She opened the modest velvet box. Inside was a jade necklace, green, like the depth of water. Not sparkling, not flashy, but still, breathtaking in its quiet truth. The room held its breath. An elderly man sitting near Arthur, an esteemed gem appraiser, squinted. He lifted the necklace silent for a few seconds, then slowly declared, "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Frasum jade. The rarest kind is found only in private collections across Asia. And this piece was blessed by Master Yuanmin himself in Chiang Rai." I recognize the mark. Gasps rippled across the room like a gathering storm. A renowned designer exclaimed, "My God, is that real? Miss Jade?" Ava froze. Her expression collapsed into stillness, then paled completely. Those who had laughed at Sienna now looked at her differently, not because she'd won, but because the truth had shattered their pride, like glass dropped on marble. Sienna didn't smile. She simply bowed her head slightly toward her grandfather. No words were needed, because at that moment, the truth had already spoken on her behalf. The grand hall doors suddenly burst open. All eyes turned confusion, flickering across faces as a man in a gray tuxedo stepped in. The chandelier light cut across his shoulders like a sword slicing through the suffocating tension. It was Lucas Caldwell, the heir to the largest private investment firm in New York. No one knew he was coming. No one had invited him. But when his gaze locked onto Sienna, the entire room understood. He wasn't here to mingle. He was here to protect. Lucas strode straight through the crowd, took Sienna's hand, in front of the entire elite assembly and spoke with a voice calm, deep, and unwavering. I'm Lucas, and I stand by her. Today, I've come to ask her grandfather for permission to marry her. A shockwave rippled through the room. Ava froze in her seat, the wine glass slipping from her hand and shattering on the marble floor. A nearby businessman murmured, "Lucas, did Lucas just say that Sienna could barely stand?" But Lucas gripped her hand like a fortress. He turned to Arthur Kingsley, who was still holding the jade necklace, and bowed slightly. So Sienna doesn't need a brand to prove her worth. She doesn't need a bank balance to earn respect. She has dignity, something no one here can buy. Silence stretched across the room like a sentence handed down. Ava jumped to her feet, her face ghost white. "You're saying this in front of me, Lucas, after everything I've done for you." Lucas didn't turn. He simply replied, "You never did anything for me. You did it for the Kingsley name and the illusion it represents." Then he opened the leather folio in his hand and raised it before the entire room. "I hereby announce, as of today, all partnerships between Caldwell Group and Vanessa Klein's Fashion House, Ethan Reed's Financial Fund, and the Ava Kingsley Foundation are officially terminated." The hall exploded. Gasps, protests, frantic shouts, phones came out instantly. A journalist whispered, "This isn't just a proposal, this is a direct strike against New York's elite." Sienna said nothing. She simply looked at Lucas, and in her eyes was something she hadn't dared believe for years. Someone had the courage to stand against an entire world of deception. Just to stand with her. Amid the chaos, ringing phones, stunned expressions, and the unraveling of hollow alliances, Arthur Kingsley rose from his seat. He leaned on his cane, his eyes cold as ice, cutting through the very room that had once stood as a fortress of his family's power. The sharp tap of his cane against the marble echoed slow, deliberate, and commanding. "That's enough," he said, and the room fell deathly silent. Arthur looked around. His gaze landed on Ava, then slowly shifted to Sienna. "There is a truth I can no longer keep hidden." He paused. "Sienna is my only biological granddaughter. She is the true blood of this family." A silent explosion swept through the hall. Wine glasses stilled, gowns froze in mid-sway. Ava staggered, grabbing the edge of the table to stay upright. Edward and Lillian, Sienna's adoptive parents, bowed their heads, silent. It had all been orchestrated for years, and now the truth swept through like wildfire, burning away every mask. Arthur continued each word, a nail sealing the door to the past. Ava was adopted after a hospital error in 1997. We knew, but we kept it quiet, out of fear, out of pride. But today, after watching Sienna be humiliated in the very house that bears our name, I refuse to stay silent any longer. Sienna stood, frozen eyes wide. The humble gift she brought, the jade necklace she had chosen with her own wages from a small diner, had become the symbol that revealed everything. Not because of its monetary value, but because of its thoughtfulness, her heart, and the unwavering loyalty she never abandoned. Arthur stepped forward and extended his hand to her. "From this day on, no one has the right to call you an outsider. You are the sole heir, and anyone who cannot accept that may leave this house right now." His words rang like a judgment, and those who had once mocked, once ridiculed Sienna, now had nowhere to hide. Some slipped out in silence. The rest lowered their heads. The hall, once a stage of pretense and arrogance, had become the witness to a rightful return of the daughter they once denied. After Arthur Kingsley's declaration, it was as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. The very people who once stood as emblems of class and status now stood exposed, isolated, avoiding eye contact, whispering in panic. Ava clutched her Dior handbag, her face pale, struggling to keep her balance in heels that once symbolized her pride. A female reporter whispered, "The trump card just flipped the entire board." Lucas stepped forward this time, not just as a man, but as a representative of an entire power structure. He pulled out a folder of documents and handed it to his assistant. All individuals, companies, and organizations involved in concealing the truth and harming Sienna. Kingsley will have their contracts reviewed. Some will be terminated effective immediately. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Ava screamed, "You can't do this to me. I'm Ava Kingsley." Lucas replied coldly, "That name was never truly yours." Ethan Reed, Sienna's former lover and now Ava's boyfriend, was escorted out of the hall by 2 security guards. Cameras swiveled, flashing in a frenzy, capturing every second of the downfall. Vanessa Klein, once the queen of fashion, now found no eyes lingering on her gowns, no ears listening to her name. Sponsors withdrew. Phones stopped ringing. Even the staff members who had once mocked Sienna were now being called out. The floor manager bowed slightly, but Arthur simply said, "Anyone who judges others by their appearance shall never set foot in this house again." Sienna remained silent. She stood amidst the quiet collapse, composed, as if none of it gave her satisfaction or joy, because her victory didn't lie in what others lost, but in the simple, undeniable fact that at last truth and kindness had prevailed. Following Arthur Kingsley's revelation, the room felt utterly hollow. Those who once stood as icons of prestige now appeared stripped bare, left with nothing but averted eyes and whispers soaked in panic. Ava clung to her Dior handbag, her face ashen, struggling to stay upright in heels that had once been her pride. A journalist murmured under her breath, "The Queen's gambit just flipped the entire board." Lucas stepped forward again this time as the voice of a system no longer willing to protect the facade. He pulled out a stack of documents and handed them to his assistant. All individuals, corporations, and entities complicit in concealing Sienna Kingsley's identity or causing her harm will have their contracts re-evaluated. Several will be terminated effective today. Gasps rippled like shockwaves. Ava shrieked, "You can't do this to me. I'm Ava Kingsley." Lucas's voice was ice. "That name was never yours." Ethan Reed, Sienna's former lover and Ava's current boyfriend, was escorted out by 2 security guards. Camera lenses turned like vultures, capturing every tremor, every collapse. Vanessa Klein, once a towering name in fashion, now stood irrelevant. No one asked about her dresses. No one called her name. Sponsors disappeared. Her phone fell silent. Even the staff members who had once snickered at Sienna were no longer exempt. The floor manager lowered his head. In shame, Arthur looked at him and simply said, "Anyone who disrespects another based on appearance shall never enter this home again." Sienna said nothing. She stood in the stillness, serene, untouched by the crumbling around her, because her victory wasn't built on others' downfall. It came from something far deeper. The day truth and kindness were no longer silenced. After the downfall of those once considered irreplaceable, Sienna stood there without a hint of smugness. She took slow steps towards the wooden podium, prepared for the birthday tribute, a place she was never meant to approach. Lucas still held her hand, his gaze grounding her with each step forward. From below the stairs no longer carried mockery, but something harder to define: admiration, shame, and quiet yearning. Arthur Kingsley sat back in his old leather chair, looking at his granddaughter, not with coldness, but as if seeing a part of his soul finally restored. "Would you like to say something to everyone?" "Sienna," he asked, his voice no longer commanding, but a respectful invitation. Sienna stood still for a moment, then gently nodded. Her voice was soft, but every syllable rang clear, like a morning bell. "I didn't come here today to prove anything. I just wanted to give my grandfather a necklace I thought he would like. I didn't expect that gift to become a reminder to all of us that true worth doesn't lie in appearances, but in the meaning behind every choice we make." No one spoke. Some bowed their heads. Some wiped away tears. Lucas looked at her, as if witnessing something sacred. A young server, the only one who had offered her water earlier, began to clap. Then another joined in. The applause started out timid, then spread like wildfire across dry fields. Within moments, the entire hall, once a coliseum of pretense, was filled with thunderous applause for the woman they had once dismissed. She didn't bow. She didn't cry. She simply gave Lucas's hand a gentle squeeze. Her eyes steady, her smile faint, as if at last she was standing exactly where she belonged. At Arthur Kingsley's grand birthday celebration, a powerful patriarch in the world of finance, a young woman named Sienna, was humiliated in her own family's home. Dressed simply and carrying a modest jade necklace, she was ridiculed by guests and insulted by Ava, the woman who had been mistakenly raised as Arthur's granddaughter. From powerful guests to staff members, all saw her as an outsider. But Sienna never retaliated. She didn't come to prove anything, only to give a gift from the heart to the grandfather she loved. That seemingly ordinary necklace turned out to be a rare and sacred artifact, blessed by a revered monk, something that could only be gifted to a soul of purity and deep virtue. The room fell into stunned silence. Then Lucas Caldwell, Sienna's partner, an heir to a financial empire, appeared and revealed that he had secretly switched the necklace, believing she deserved one true chance to be seen for who she was. In front of everyone, he proposed and asked Arthur Kingsley for his blessing. The moment reached its peak when Arthur stood and announced the truth. Sienna was his biological granddaughter. Ava, raised in her place, had been adopted due to a hospital error. With regret in his voice, Arthur named Sienna the sole heir to the Kingsley legacy. Those who had mocked her were swiftly cut off. Ava lost her identity. Ethan Reed, her ex-boyfriend and betrayer, was expelled. Major contracts were cancelled, and once powerful figures in the social world lost their standing. But Sienna did not seek revenge. She stood with quiet strength, knowing that true value never has to scream to be seen. As she stepped onto the balcony beside Lucas and Arthur, those who once looked down on her now bowed their heads. She didn't need diamonds. She didn't need a famous surname. She only had to walk into the room, and the entire world fell silent. They called her a fraud, mocked her cotton dress, and laughed at the small bracelet she brought. To them, she was a stain in a room of luxury. But they forgot what makes someone truly shine isn't where they come from. It's the dignity they carry when facing contempt. Sienna didn't need to retaliate. She didn't need to raise her voice. She simply stood quiet, proud, and let the truth speak for itself. She made the entire room fall silent. As hollow prestige crumbled piece by piece, it was her honest heart that made them bow their heads. This story isn't just meant to inspire. It's a reminder for you, for me, for all of us. Walk like Sienna, kind, steady, and never losing who you are. If you've ever felt judged, if you've ever wished someone would stand by your side, remember this: you are not alone. Leave a comment if you've ever been to Sienna. Share this video if you believe in true worth. Subscribe to Toch Story, where we tell stories that remind you kindness is the greatest power of all, because sometimes silence is the most powerful answer, and the true heir doesn't need to stand at the center of the stage. She only needs to walk in, and the entire room will rise.